This episode is brought to you by Hunt Hickory Creek. And new to Hunt Hickory Creek this year is their Central Kansas Lodge. They're going to be running hunters from the end of October all the way through January, and their main hunting area is located between Quivira National Refuge and Cheyenne Bottoms. Central Kansas is a special place for waterfowl hunting, and during the peak migration, those refuges hold hundreds of thousands, if not close to millions of ducks and geese at a time. Mainly specklebelly, snow, and lesser Canada geese, mallards, pintails, and widgeon. You may have an opportunity to harvest all of these species in one hunt. You'll be very comfortable every morning in their Avian X A-frame blinds or laying on backboards, and they hunt over 1,200 of the industry's finest decoys. So visit their website at www.hunthickorycreek.com for booking information and follow them throughout the year on Facebook and Instagram. And don't miss your opportunity at a hunt of a lifetime with Hunt Hickory Creek. If you're going to hunt Kansas, hunt Hickory Creek. Welcome to the Fowl Front Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, where our goal is to recruit and educate new hunters while entertaining the rest of you. Without new hunters and the mentorship of those more seasoned, this passion as we know it faces an uncertain future. So get the word out, turn the volume up, and enjoy the show, because you're on the Fowl Front. This episode is also brought to you by Grip Pack Calls. If you want to produce a more versatile, realistic, and higher quality sound with all the ease of a double reed, whether you're looking to up your game or just starting out, let a Grip Pack call work just as hard for you as the Grip Pack crew did to develop and bring you next level quality with easy blowing calls. Grip Pack Calls. Find your grit. This episode is also supported by Goose Ninja Call Lanyards, MDR Custom Woodworks, Twisted Wire Upland Hunts out of Grand Island, Nebraska, and from our friends over at High Prairie Sportsman over on YouTube.
All right, guys, this is Tegan here. I'm going to be taking over a little bit this week, not too much. Ben's going to be my wingman for a change. And this week on the show, we're speaking with Brian Moyse, the Regional Director of Delta Waterfowl in Illinois and Indiana. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Can't complain. It's been a little cooler down here than it was the past couple weeks, so that's nice. I'm not sweating my buns off as much at work. So how is it in your neck of the woods?
We've had a pretty good streak of hot weather as well, and now it seems like we've had quite a bit of rain last week or so, with more being forecasted. So we should have ample water for this fall.
Yeah, I saw on your Facebook page that there's a little bit of flooding going on down your way.
Yeah, there has been quite a bit of flooding, and a lot of the temporary seasonal wetlands around this particular area are overflowing, if you will. We almost have too much water right now.
Yeah, well, hopefully those get drawn down a little bit, and hopefully it doesn't mess up any later season nesting with any local birds you got up in that area.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, you are going to start seeing, some of the, the ducks starting to nest, have their second broods, or, ones that weren't successful on the first try, re-nesting. So, yeah, hopefully that won't negatively impact, the local waterfowl production.
Now, is that the primary concern with over flooding in the summer? Is the nesting habitat?
Well, ducks are pretty versatile, especially, the mallards around this area. So, if anything, we may be actually enhancing a little bit as, some of the upland, areas are putting some more water on. I guess, too much. If we get massive flooding, obviously we could wipe out some nests. But I think we're in pretty good shape right now. We haven't had widespread massive flooding, so I think I'd rather have ample amount of water than, what some of the areas are experiencing with, very, very dry weather.
Right. I always thought summer water was good. So.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, just, to a certain extent. As long as we don't have massive flooding, I think we'll be okay in this area.
We definitely could use some more water down this way. The wildlife area I'm working at this summer, our marshes, boy, they are dry.
Oh, no kidding. There's some areas I know, some of the prime nesting areas, for puddle ducks in the Missouri Coteau area, that there's still a little bit on the dry side. There are areas throughout, southeast North Dakota, and South Dakota actually looks pretty good right now as well. But I know there's some areas in North Dakota where they're still hoping they get some more rain for those, late season nesting birds.
For sure. Well, hey, first question I wanted to ask you, Brian, is how did you get involved in the outdoors? And, particularly waterfowl hunting, but sometimes that's not everyone's first experience. So, any way it happened, what was your first experience?
Yeah, it's funny. My father really didn't waterfowl hunt. He was more of a deer hunter and fisherman, so I grew up, doing quite a bit of fishing. I grew up on the St. Lawrence River in upstate New York, and I guess I'd always been fascinated, from a young kid, with waterfowl in general, but I had quite a few friends and, local friends that did quite a bit of waterfowl hunting, so, I got involved with it. I think I was 12 years old when I first started duck hunting up there, and, it was quite an experience, and, just growing up in the area of such a rich, waterfowling history and so on, I was immediately hooked, and now it's, kind of taken over, if you will, every facet of my life.
I hear you there. That's, I always say that anything in my life, I wouldn't say I'm revolved around waterfowl, but I'm revolved around waterfowl.
It's
schoolwork and hobbies.
Yeah, very central tenet. Yeah.
Well, hey Brian, how did you get hooked up with Delta Waterfowl? And go ahead and kind of explain your job. What is it exactly? As the regional director for Illinois and Indiana, what exactly does that entail?
Okay. Well, I started with Delta Waterfowl in mid-January of this year, so I'm fairly new to the organization as far as working for them, but I've had, experience as a volunteer and a member for quite some time with Delta Waterfowl and known quite a bit about what they do as an organization. So primarily with my job, I work with, chapters throughout both Illinois and Indiana, not only from a fundraising perspective, but also with some of their projects they can do. Delta's a little different than some of the other waterfowl conservation organizations, whereas with Delta Waterfowl, the chapters actually retain a portion of their proceeds from their annual banquets, and then they can utilize those funds for various projects, such as, nest structures, which are wood duck boxes, hen tubes, nesting tubes, youth hunts, youth field days, for kids, educational field days, whatnot. So there's quite a bit that the chapter can do to not only ensure, the future of waterfowling, but also what they can do is they can do a lot to impact the local community and their local areas as well. So that really interests me, when I was deciding, to move forward with Delta Waterfowl as a career, a full-time career, but also it gives me a lot of variety in my day-to-day job. Also work with, on local issues and whatnot with some of the, state wildlife areas and whatnot. We're trying to enhance hunting opportunities for the duck hunter, such as blind building on some of the state grounds, better habitat on those particular state grounds, obviously to attract and retain, ducks during the season. Plus, when they're on the way back in the spring, ensure that they have, good resting areas and abundant food for them on the way back, to the breeding grounds and whatnot. So, there's fundraising obviously is a big part of my job, but having a local voice for the duck hunter and working with those particular projects that the chapter really gets to decide what's important to them to work on a local level. So I have quite a bit of variety in my job, and it's really exciting to work with the volunteers from both of these states, and it's a very time-consuming job, but I mean, the days just fly by when you're doing something that you really love.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, it's good to hear that what you're doing is something that you do love. I'm sure that reflects in your work as well. And, I guess that's one thing. I mean, You're right. That's a lot of variety with your work, and I'm going to backpedal here a little bit to one of the first things you said. With you guys get to keep a little bit of those funds for your local chapters, and I think that's awesome because one of the questions you hear a lot of people ask with other conservation programs is where does my money go towards, or what is it doing? And so I think that's really cool that your local chapters, you guys get to see some of that stuff happening, and maybe gives you a little bit more incentive to keep donating, keep volunteering, because you see an end in goal, or you see those wood duck boxes being built. I think that probably drives you a little bit more even to work with them.
It really does. I mean, I'm 47 now. My son has graduated from college, so my wife and I are empty nesters, and I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where, I'm really starting to think about the future, the future generations, and really trying to help ensure that not only there are going to be ducks, in the air, but also that they're going to have ample opportunities to hunt. And, kids today, I think they're pulled in so many different directions with sports. Schoolwork is more demanding. You see kids, that get, pretty wrapped up in social media and electronics and whatnot. So there's still a lot of kids out there that want to get involved in the outdoors. And I think, as we've seen over the years, the declining numbers of duck hunters, I think it's even more important that, we get out there and we do what we can to ensure that those kids that really have a desire to get out in the outdoors, not only hunting, but fishing and bird watching and whatnot, that we really give them some of those opportunities to do that. So, it's great working with these local chapters, because they're all in the same, mindset, if you will. They're all about, trying to get the youth outdoors, get them out in the duck blind, and give them those opportunities. So I think in today's day and age, it's even more important. Obviously, private lands, may be more difficult to get on. So, we really need to do what we can to ensure that there's a future for waterfowl hunting.
Yeah, I liked what you said, about kids and the social media and stuff. I've got a 12-week-old right now, and my greatest fear is that for her 10th birthday or her 12th birthday, instead of wanting a shotgun or wanting to, get her own set of decoys or something like that, that she's going to want like a Game Boy or an iPad or something like that. And, and I think it's super important. Now, I noticed on your Facebook page here, you recently had a really cool youth day in Indiana, building wood duck boxes and stuff. And one of the main goals of the Fowl Front is to educate new hunters and youth. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your role in mentoring youth? And maybe give us some advice in introducing youth into waterfowl. I know maybe perhaps next summer or the summer after that, we're hoping to do kind of an after school. Once the school gets out, do like a little camp around here to maybe get, hunter's ed, and then help them learn about all the different types of hunting and kind of, a little after school program. But do you have any advice moving forward for us?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that, I'm fortunate as a regional director within Illinois and Indiana is I have so many dedicated volunteers that are committed to that as well, providing opportunities, for the kids to get outdoors. And, I'm here, in a way to assist them, into achieving those goals and whatnot, kind of facilitating that. It's interesting, like with, as a particular example, I know this chapter utilized their local high school, and their shop classes, and they were actually building these wood duck boxes. And from there, it really expanded to the point where some of those kids in the shop class kind of wanted to see the efforts of their work. And they hadn't really perhaps had an interest in ducks and waterfowling, but from that, if you will. So it kind of took off from there where more kids got involved with it. And I think, A lot of times when you're working in a local community, and these Delta chapters that have been around for a number of years now, they've kind of known as the people to go to when a kid does present with the interest to get outdoors and to do something. And the nice thing is about waterfowling, and we're lucky. We're a small, tight-knit community of waterfowl hunters, but the majority of waterfowl hunters out there are really dedicated to not only the conservation of the waterfowl, but getting future generations involved as well. So I think when they see someone, a younger, person that, has that interest, is getting them outdoors. And it's just not during, waterfowl season itself. I think we all think of it as, getting out in the fall. And I mean, all of us enjoy getting out in the blind in the fall, but there's so many more things. So you mentioned like the wood duck box program that we're getting kids out for. One of the things that we're doing during the summertime is, at some of these youth events, we're teaching kids how to call, giving them an introduction to duck calling, if you will. And the Delta chapters are giving them, the Delta youth duck calls. And, we're teaching them how to set decoys. And kids have this natural curiosity, and they really like to participate in it and learn. So it's, you get one of those kids involved in it, and then all of a sudden, hey, I have a friend, or they go to school and they're telling, their buddies about it, or their friends at school, and then all of a sudden it really takes off. So,
right.
I think from any, conservation organization or any group of, waterfowlers that are trying to do a youth day, it's stick with it, get out there, try to get the word out on what you're trying to accomplish, with the kids and the youth education days and whatnot. And, if you do it year after year, we've seen this growth, this natural growth in these areas with those youth events. I have some chapters that have been doing it now, for 6 or 8 years plus, and every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, it's rewarding to see, the work, being rewarded, if you will, by the success of these events. So I guess, for starting out a youth event, you really want to go and let people know about it, let the community know what you're trying to do, and, local chapters of various conservation organizations and whatnot. And that's great what you guys are doing, and I wish you all the luck with it.
Yeah, I think it's important to, for any parents out there that have a kid that are going to a youth day, a lot of times at these youth days, I see kids that come from hunting families. And I think that if you're going to take your kid to one of these youth days, I think you should reach out to one of your kid's friends' parents and say, hey, little Tyke is going to, waterfowl youth day. Would your, son or daughter be interested in joining him? One of those things, because, unfortunately, kids.
Sure, I think that's a great point. Or even ask your son or daughter, hey, do you have any friends that you think would like to come with you as well? A lot of times, the kids know, people that have an interest in the outdoors and whatnot. And yeah, you're right. I think just getting the word out like that, and having those people make those calls or those contacts can really, help drive, good numbers at your event. Yeah,
because we can get all the kids we want in there, but unfortunately the kids, they don't have any control over their time or resources or money, or, they can't drive themselves there. So,
I kind of like, well, first of all, it makes me really happy, Brian, that you say that you've noticed an incline or an increase, in those youth days. That's awesome that it's going uphill. That makes me, pretty happy. And, another thing you said was a really good point that, if kids experience something like this, all they need is that maybe one experience, and it's awesome, and they have a great time. And then they go to school, like you were saying, they tell all their friends and all their buddies, like, hey, come to me with this next weekend. And I think that's awesome, because that's how, kind of like Ben's talking about, I think you get, kids who weren't raised in a hunting household already involved, into hunting, and that's really the only way we're going to be able to increase our hunter numbers.
It really is. It really is. And I think there's so many kids, and I'm actually surprised, at the number of adults as well, that I've seen over, the past 6 months that really want to get involved in it, and they just don't know how to get started, especially waterfowl hunting. Waterfowl hunting is not an easy sport to get into, even if you're an avid outdoors person, fishing or deer hunting or whatnot. It's kind of daunting, for people, to figure out how to get started. So I think all of us, as hunters and as conservationists, if, we look at a big picture and the future, not only of duck hunting, but of waterfowl conservation really rests on the shoulders of us right now. And I think it's so important right now, to get out and get those, kids involved with the outdoors.
Agreed. That's why the Fowl Front Waterfowl podcast exists. So,
yeah, that's our main mission, really, is connect with youth, and not even just youth, non-hunters as well. A lot of people can start hunting later in life. Brian, you touched on this a little bit, throughout the show already, but I would like to, kind of ask you directly, kind of give us a rundown, like, why should someone support Delta Waterfowl? And I'll add in there, one of the few things that I do dislike seeing sometimes in the hunting community is, people will say, well, you should, support DU instead, or NWTF, or Pheasants Forever. And, I'm over here, I'm like, why not support them all? And, I think a really common misconception is that they are completely separate entities when, at least with my experience, they're not. And so, I was wondering, if you could maybe touch on, why should we support Delta Waterfowl? What's the work that you guys do? And then as well, kind of talk about your work alongside with maybe DU or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or maybe even just state or local agencies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you kind of touched on a couple really good points there. I think especially in today's day and age, we really need to work together as a waterfowling community to ensure that we're going to have, those opportunities to get out and waterfowl hunt. Plus, we're going to have those, that voice, that accumulated voice when, like the Farm Bill, it just, got out of the Senate Ag Committee right now. So, to have that united voice as duck hunters, not only from Delta Waterfowl, but from some of the other organizations, whether they be national, local, or state organizations. So I think it's, equally important to support all the organizations because, after all, we are working towards a common goal. And I do know that a lot of the organizations do work hand in hand. Even though their work may vary a little bit from organization to organization, they are working for a common goal. One of the things with Delta Waterfowl, Delta Waterfowl is really committed to not only providing, ensuring that we're going to have ample duck numbers, but Delta is really taking a active role in providing a voice for the duck hunter. Well, what does that mean? That's kind of easy to say. Well, number one, I just brought up with having that voice in Washington when it comes to certain measures, such as the Ag Farm Bill, and having certain measures added to it. Delta Waterfowl had been working in North Dakota with a local program called Working Wetlands, and it's very similar to the CRP program, giving farmers incentives to lead those seasonal and temporary small wetlands, which really they have the greatest positive impact on, duck production, in the north area. So Delta was successful working with, other organizations and whatnot of having that added to the Farm Bill. The other thing that they do for the voice of the duck hunter, for example, on the Atlantic Flyway, they're, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is now trying to reduce the mallard harvest from 4 daily to 2 daily. So what we're doing as an organization, we're working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and trying to provide some of the scientific data behind why that decision may not be, the right decision, and giving suggestions and whatnot, working, towards finding a happy medium that is good for the duck hunters, but at the same time ensuring that we're going to have that abundant, breeding population, that we're not going to negatively impact the breeding population. So, and times there are local issues as well. Maybe decreased access to a local, state wildlife area, whatnot. So Delta really does try to, provide an active role, both nationally and, at the local level as well. So, Delta, I think, has, since its inception, with its start, the roots going back to 1911, has primarily been known as a research-based organization, and providing that research to other organizations, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and, state agencies as well. Really where, the term of waterfowl conservation really came from, with Delta and being a research-based, organization. And we're still committed to that research, even today, but also coupled with the fact that we're working a lot more on the policy issues that affects not only waterfowl production, but also perhaps, opportunities for the duck hunter as well. And one of our biggest goals now is, as we've talked, for a little while now, is, providing those opportunities for the first-time hunters to get a field. So, Delta really works in a lot of different facets, but, again, I think that all the organizations are working towards the same goal. And, I've been a member, of Delta and other waterfowl conservation organizations, both, and I think they should try to support all those organizations as well.
I think that's the biggest travesty about it all is that people think you ought to choose or pick and whatnot. And I think, if you care that much about it, to be choosing and picking, which one it is, why don't you, care a little bit more, and donate to both, one of those things. Like, if you care that much, go ahead and put your money where your mouth is.
And a lot of times too, I think we always think of, committing to an organization as, financially, and obviously that's what keeps the work that these organizations like Delta, moving forward. But also, I think one of the most important things about, Delta Waterfowl is we are a volunteer-based organization, and you cannot discount how important volunteers are to our organization, not only from a fundraising perspective, but, the volunteers spend these, countless hours, working on these local projects and are so dedicated to it. So even, in terms, some people may not, it may not be financially feasible for them to do everything, and to those people, I would say if you really believe in a few hours every year, and it's amazing. I guess what I would say to the people that, may not financially be able to donate to several organizations is, think seriously about, becoming a volunteer of one of those organizations like Delta. I mean, that's what keeps these organizations going, is all the hard work that the volunteers put in, not only from a fundraising perspective, but working with those local nest structure projects, putting on a youth hunt, putting on a youth field day. So, I mean, the volunteers really are the backbone of Delta Waterfowl, and I mean, they're just so important to us. It's amazing. The first time I went up to Bismarck to Delta's headquarters, there's a room in there that's just filled with all the research, that's taken place since Delta's inception. And it's incredible the volumes and volumes of research that have been done. And, essentially the people, James Ford Bell, that started, based Delta it was out of concern. We saw the decline of waterfowl numbers, and he actually brought in, Aldo Leopold to, help him, address that situation with the declining, duck numbers. So, conservation's gone back a long, long time, but, it's amazing how much has been done since then, and it's amazing how, technology has improved, the efficiency of waterfowl conservation. And I think now, we're taking it, to another level, not only of waterfowl conservation, but, looking at the bigger picture of, creating those opportunities for, duck hunters and, youth hunters that we've talked about. So, the organization has really grown, and it's evolved over the years as well, to start addressing some of these issues as they occur. And we do a lot of surveys with the volunteers and with the membership to make sure that as an organization, we really are providing or attempting to provide the solutions that our membership is looking for. And it's just, from those people that, the early, days of, not only waterfowl conservation, but conservation in general, came out of, concern and whatnot. And I think, we have so many pressures being put on us in our daily lives that, obviously none of us really have to hunt in today's day and age, to provide sustenance for our family, but we do it because we truly love the outdoors and being out there enjoying nature's finest. But, it's really important that everyone, whether it's financial or, volunteering, putting some time in to really ensure that, it's there for our children, for their children, for future generations.
Yeah, Brian, you made a really good point there. You said, this day and age, we don't have to hunt to feed our family anymore, realistically. And, I'm glad you said it, because the other thing I wanted to kind of backtrack on and talk a little bit about with Delta's work is a piece of work that I think a lot of people look past, because when they think of Delta Waterfowl, they think of, probably a little bit more habitat management and, hunters' rights as far as like public hunting, but I don't think they truly realize the battle that we, sometimes face uphill on Capitol Hill. And, you mentioned the Farm Bill and some of those other bills that go through Senate. And I think it's important for our listeners to know, hunting isn't a right at this point, in this country. It's something that we are fighting for. And so, I think that's awesome that Delta takes a stand, at a really high level and speaks for all of us, here at home that enjoy this great passion and this great hobby.
I'm just glad somebody's up there talking to politicians so that I don't have to, really. Because, I don't really have the, patience or, I guess, maybe knowledge and intelligence for that kind of thing, But I sure am glad someone's out there speaking on my behalf in that regard.
It really is amazing how much is going on behind the scenes. And, you truly do need in today's day and age, someone to be out there as a voice. And, the person that from Delta headquarters in Bismarck, who's in charge of that is John Devney. And John works tirelessly for Delta Waterfowl, for their membership, and for waterfowlers in general. And, one of the things, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. For example, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just announced that they have expanded hunting access to national wildlife refuges all over the country. by the tune of over 200,000 acres total, for the entire country. So those are the things that, Delta sees that one of the biggest barriers for duck hunting is access. And so we're really trying to be out there to try to help, the duck hunters with access to, these public lands and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, we're so fortunate as an organization and for waterfowlers in general to have someone like John Devney working, tirelessly for us. And it's amazing what's going on behind the scenes. I think in today's day and age, we can get a little jaded about things, and sometimes the media tends to focus on some of the negative things that are going on around the world. There's so many positive things that are going on right now, and a lot of people don't know about it, that it's occurring. And I think, more than ever, we really need to, work as a community, waterfowl hunters to, I've said it probably 10 times already, to really ensure that there is a future for waterfowl hunting.
For sure. You're talking about the limit of land, and I think that's funny because, the other day a guy made a comment to me about how, he said he doesn't think that, maybe duck hunter numbers are quite as bad as people say because there seems to be a ton of duck hunters out there. But, I think maybe it's just because there's limited land. It seems like there's so many hunters because you might have 20 hunters on every single public pool.
Yeah, and I think, there's some truth to that, as public areas are getting, perhaps more pressure just because people have limited access, to private lands and whatnot. I do know when I moved to Illinois about 17 years ago, I met quite a few people and, through my local chapters and when I started volunteering at my local chapters. And so I think the more active you are in not only waterfowl hunting, but conservation and getting involved, I think, a lot of those opportunities do happen. They do occur, as getting involved. But I think you're right to a certain extent. I think, some of those areas are more pressure. And, frankly, just as well as I do, there's certain areas that tend to produce, more ducks, than others. And so I think, in today's day and age of, social media and whatnot, unfortunately, sometimes the word gets out and then all of a sudden, those particular areas that are high producing areas tend to get a little bit more crowded, than some of the other areas as well. But
yeah, I've always thought of it kind of as the evolution of your waterfowling, hunting. Everybody starts on public land. That's perfectly, that's exactly what it's there for. And then, everybody hunts a little bit of public land each year, but I almost look at it kind of, as you, evolve as a hunter, you got to try to, reclaim some of that private ground and, for habitat and hunting opportunity through permissions and networking with people and educating them about the benefits of having waterfowl habitat and having people hunt waterfowl on your property. So,
Ben, you just said networking, and that's one thing, I noticed, Brian, you said that you started meeting some people, hey, for you listeners out there, what better place to meet a future long-term hunting friend and partner and maybe share some spots with somebody than at a local event like Delta, working together with like-minded people with a common conservation goal. I've met friends that I think I'm probably going to be lifelong friends with now at such events. And, again, what better place to do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And, just getting involved in, in today's day and age, again, with social media, you hear about so many projects going on and events. Just going out there, introducing yourself. You see these banding projects going on. What a great opportunity to go out and meet, like-minded people and, kind of network. And, some of the people that I met when I first moved here to Illinois 17 years ago, I'm still really good friends with, and we still hunt a lot together. So, it's a great opportunity.
All right. So Brian, you grew up in New York. and then you lived in California for 8 years, and now you said you've been in Illinois for 17?
Yes.
Man, I mean, well, tell us about your hunting experiences. I mean, that's crazy. 3 out of the 4 flyways, all over the country. I mean, what's some of the coolest places you've hunted? What's some of your experiences? I mean, just tell us about, that moving around. That's got to be pretty cool, right?
It's been great. I feel really fortunate. I grew up on the St. Lawrence River in upstate New York, and that was an area that was just renowned for waterfowl hunting, the history, and the people that grew up there with a decoy carving, was a hotbed of decoy carvers back in the day. And then, just experiencing some of the different, waterfowl that migrated through that area. And I don't think a lot of people, and I didn't at the time, realize what a huge state California, especially Northern California, is to waterfowl hunting. It's just incredible. And if you've never, I can remember going up into the Klamath Basin, when we first moved out there, and just seeing the millions of ducks and geese that were migrating through that area. And then, the rice, fields and, Sacramento Valley. It's just incredible out there. But
well, there's a reason the Pacific Flyway has a 7 duck limit, right?
Yeah, and 107-day season, that's right. Yeah, it's just incredible the amount of birds, that are coming through that flyway, and, the variety of ducks and geese that you have out there as well. And then being here in northern Illinois, we have quite a variety of waterfowl hunting experiences as well. When I first moved here, I used to go up to Horicon Marsh, which is only a little over an hour away. And the rich history of waterfowl hunting there, and the Mississippi River, and, the goose hunting in Illinois is just renowned. So I've been really fortunate, to experience, like you said, some of the different flyways, and met a lot of great people, in all 3 flyways, and consider some, even though I might not live there, some have some great friends still in those flyways, and just an incredible experience. I'm really fortunate. I am. But, the thing is that I don't think people realize now, we've had a stretch of 8 or 10 years now where we've had such great waterfowl numbers, and I think back to when I was in high school, the 30-day seasons, the 3 duck limits, and, back then, we really are, and I tell this to my son all the time. I said, to my son Ben, these are the good old days right now. We're really fortunate. We've been on a run here with very liberal seasons and bag limits, for quite some time, and good numbers of waterfowl in the air. So, it is important to really enjoy it now, and, don't take it for granted,
Right. I was just on a fishing trip with my grandpa, and, I asked him, hey, why didn't we go duck hunting more often when I was younger? And we did intermittently,
We're fortunate right now.
Yeah. And he just told me, he said, well, there weren't any ducks. And I said, oh, that's that.
There were less ducks, and there were just less opportunities. I know, listening to some old-timers talk, it truly wasn't on a large scale that long ago when there was the point system and, 30-day long seasons. And, you hate to see people take what we have right now for granted, because it could definitely be a lot worse.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. For me personally, the days of the big bags aren't nearly as important as just, the experience of getting out and, sharing it with other people, and really enjoying what we have right now. We're really fortunate. It wasn't even that many years ago where, our canvasback season was closed. Mm. And, for the past 2 seasons here, we've been able, to harvest 2 canvasbacks a day. We really are fortunate to what we have going on right now.
Yeah, kind of a nerdy little moment that I had right here was waterfowl trends, they go up and down with, for every environmental variable that there is. And I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan or anything like that, but like, we're summer babies, we were born during the good times, and, people, the older folks, or not calling you an older folk, Brian, but the more seasoned waterfowl hunters, keep telling us, winter's coming, like bad times can be ahead. You're never assured a good, year.
Well, you're not. I mean, and we think about it, from just the perspective of the duck hunter all the time. Well, think about the duck. I mean, there's more pressure, especially now commodity prices have been dropping. So there's more pressure on the farmer to make the best use out of their land, 90% of the ducks that are raised on private land.
Yeah.
90% are raised on private land. So,
well, they say in 2050, we're going to have to produce twice the amount of, food and agriculture on the same amount of, acres.
That's right. And, we look at the pressures, the financial pressures of the farmers, and, if they have an area that's a seasonal or temporary wetland, it's tempting for them, to till it under, to run, field lines through it and whatnot. And then you think about some of the other factors as well to the ducks. Predator management is huge right now. Fur prices aren't quite what they used to be. So, you have so many more predators out there, and you have some predators such as the raccoon that weren't naturally in certain areas, that are in prime, duck breeding areas. And, Delta has long been a proponent, predator management, and we actively, take part in that. And we actively, in those high production areas, utilize trappers, to ensure that they are producing, good brood numbers out of those areas, because, to maintain, that stable population of, ducks, you need about a 12% success rate. Well, in some of those areas of high predation and, low areas of, seasonal and temporary wetlands, we're not going to meet those thresholds. So we really have to work hard, as waterfowl hunters and conservationists to ensure that, the ducklings have a fighting chance.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point. You said, we think about ourselves, obviously, but, like you said, what about the duck? And, the predator management is a very good example. I think a lot of people don't truly understand how hard it is for some of these wild animals, particularly, migratory birds, to be successful. I mean, water shortage is obviously a huge thing that people think about, but you need the food, you need the cover and the protection, and I think that's one of the things, I've been following that Delta project with the trapping in the Dakotas for a while now, and, I love reading all the updates and seeing all the videos online, and, again, I think that people don't truly understand that, hey, there's a lot of pressure on these birds to be successful, and, for a lot of people that maybe aren't too familiar with statistics or any kind of analytics, a 12% success rate, 12%, that's a pretty high number when you're, looking at percentages.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's so many things that we can do, to help them not only achieve those numbers, but, surpass those numbers. One of the things that, Delta, has really been a proponent of, and a lot of the research, has shown, hen houses, for example, the nesting tubes, make it so much, the brood so much more successful just because they're not as immediately available to predators or predation on their nests, when they're nesting in the upland habitats and whatnot. Because you think about, you don't have these large tracts of grasslands anymore. There may be, very small strips around these seasonal and temporary wetlands. Just because we have the seasonal and temporary wetlands doesn't naturally mean that we're going to have, success on those wetlands. So, utilizing predator management, utilizing the hen houses, it's astonishing some of the numbers that have, success numbers, percentages that have been achieved by utilizing those two tactics, together. So, we kind of, I know that's one of the things that really, intrigued me about Delta and really brought me, to, seek out a position with Delta is, yes, we have to look at, the national, perspective, for waterfowl, just because they're a migratory, bird. I mean, but at the same time, we can still do things on the local level, to help impact those, positively help impact those duck numbers and, to get more people involved in the sport. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting work going on right now. One of the things they're doing now is, for the overwater nesters like canvasbacks and redheads, which are notoriously hard to research because, physically you have to get out there with a pair of waders and find those nests. So one of the things that they're doing now is they're actually using drones with infrared technology to actually locate those nest sites so we can start doing more accurate research on those overwater nesters such as your canvasbacks and your redheads. It's just amazing some of the work that's going on right now.
Yeah, a couple things. One, the drones, like you were saying earlier, sometimes we get wrapped up in some of this common age stuff, and I totally agree. I think, social media particularly, has its ups and its downs, but I think, having an optimistic outlook on it, the drones are a good thing in a common era. Some of those surveys that they can go over and, maybe the better accuracy in some of the bird count numbers. And then like you were saying with the redhead and canvasback nest out in the water, when you don't have to get men out there, maybe you might have a little more accuracy, it might be a little bit easier. Heck, it might even be a little cheaper. So, look at things positively, listeners.
Yeah, okay, question for you, though, for both of you. Paint me ignorant here, and this is a great learning opportunity, I think. What is an overwater nester?
Well, go ahead. Well, typically when we think of duck broods, we think of, mallards and they're nesting in a grass nest in an upland environment on dry land, okay?
Right.
Or say a wood duck's in a box, or a nesting cavity in a tree. Well, when those ducklings hatch, say from, the puddle duck nest, your mallards, your pintails, your teal, your gadwalls, and so on and so forth, the brood's going to hatch, and then within a short period of time, they're going to travel to water. Whereas an overwater nester, like a canvasback, what they'll do is, say on the edge of the reeds, they'll actually build a nest, and that nest will be over water. Okay, so they'll build that structure within, the surrounding vegetation and whatnot. And so, there's a lot of, it's just, you think about it. So if we want to study, how predation affects the canvasback numbers, well, you have to physically get out there and find those nests first before we can study them. And that's really labor intensive. In an upland scenario, there's proven very efficient methods of finding those nests, but for an overwater nester, you think about the labor involved. And, as a waterfowl hunter, some of those areas are a little silty, and it's so, utilizing technology to make, the research, on those particular birds so much more efficient. It's amazing how much more efficient. And once you locate where those nests are, then you can pinpoint and then, send, people out there to do counts and to, track, the success rates and some of the things that they're currently doing to research, those populations of your divers.
Yeah, I'm sure those people that are trudging through that water in their waders I'm sure they appreciate the accuracy of those given nests.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
Well, hey, Brian, so the first time that I actually met you was in Illinois. We were out there banding some lesser scaup and some canvasback out there at Kibbe Station, which was actually my first experience banding ducks. And, talk about an amazing spring break. But besides the ducks and the banding, one of the things that just really captured my attention was you and Pat Gregory's decoy carvings. And you touched on this a little bit earlier. You said growing up around the St. Lawrence River that decoy carving was kind of a tradition around there. And I was just wondering, maybe talk about some of your decoy carving and how you got into it. And I noticed that you primarily do some divers with your carving. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, growing up in that area, having a rich history of, decoy carving, I essentially got into it just for practical reasons, to actually use the decoys that I was carving, and trying to build, a decent rig. I carved, kind of with a mentor up there that helped me get started and whatnot. So I carved through high school and then a couple years into college, and then, post-college, starting a family and job. The career, I basically put it aside for almost 20 years. I didn't carve at all. And I took it back up again about 7 years ago. And again, it was for practical reasons. I wanted to hunt some of the decoys, that I carved. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes out of, hunting over your own decoys. So, I'll be honest with you, the reason why I probably carve divers, it's how I got started with duck hunting. We still do a lot of puddle duck hunting, a lot of goose hunting, out in the fields in some of the local areas around here, but I really enjoy diver hunting, and I really like, carving those decoys to use when we do diver hunt. And we do quite a bit of diver hunting as well, in the fall. So, yeah, I still, I do donate some decoys, the various organizations, and among one, Delta, and I have, for several years now. But we do hunt quite a few of the decoys that I make.
That's awesome, because like you said, there's something to be said about hunting over a decoy that you've spent some time on. I can just attest to it through just painting and rigging and all that stuff, but that's really practical, especially if weight really, I don't know what one of your decoys weighs, one of your gunner decoys weighs, but that's something that I know me and Tegan have been talking about the last couple of weeks, is trying to try our hand at carving some duck decoys. And because you can go out and buy them and paint them, or you can go out and buy a garage sale decoys and paint or flock those things up. But there's got to be something about taking raw material from the earth and turning it into a something to trick another raw material from the earth onto your dinner plate. So
yeah, it really is, and not only that, it's a great hobby / pastime, whatever you want to call it, to do in the off season. During duck season, I don't touch a decoy. I don't carve. I don't paint. I'm duck hunting. When I have free time, I'm out duck hunting. But, as soon as season closes down, or we're not traveling any longer, I get right back after it, and I do it as much as I can, in my spare time. It's a fun way to kind of keep, this serious addiction that we call waterfowl hunting going year round. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to touch on was, that's got to be a pretty fun activity to keep you involved, because, as they say, duck depression, it's a real thing. And so outside of season, what are you going to do to stay involved? And I imagine, as you said, that's a pretty good hobby to get into to keep you tuned in.
Plus, it would be nice to have a set of decoys that I could hang on the wall instead of, no one wants to see my 1995 Flambeau plastic beat up mallard decoy. But, you touch those things out, it'd be, I'm looking around at my office right now that we're recording in, and, I've got a little bit of taxidermy, but nothing, no cool artwork like that. And that's exactly what decoys are. They're artwork, or they should be.
It's fun. There's so much history in it as well, and I think it really connects you to the history of waterfowling as well. until late, plastic decoys didn't exist,
Right.
and people relied on their own skill and their own work, to produce a rig. And I think there's something to be said just connecting with that history of waterfowl hunting. And, it's great. As I've been doing it, to retire some of the birds, some of the, decoys out of my rig and put them aside for my son. And, there are times, where I've, given decoys to family members or really close friends at times, just to have that connection, with not only the support, but the sport itself, but with, the people that you enjoy it with.
Well, it's a sport all in itself too, isn't it?
Well, I guess probably what you're referring to are some of the shows and whatnot. It's, again, I mean, there are people that, carve, just for shows, like more on a decorative level. Again, it's kind of the way I look at those shows is it's kind of a means to, pass the off season as well. Some people that get out and train and work with their dogs, they choose, in the off season maybe to participate in hunt tests and, get out with like-minded people. And, I think the decoy carvers as a whole, we do that as well. We go to the different, shows, around the country and get together and, swap stories about duck hunting and about carving and whatnot. So, we're pretty, all like-minded individuals that, we've gotten crazy over a duck at a very young age, and it's really taken off from there.
That's one of my favorite things about duck hunting. I grew up deer and turkey hunting were actually some of my first experiences, but one of the main things that really grasped me with duck hunting was the camaraderie, and what you're talking about there with the humility of some of those decoy carvers like yourself. I mean, that's awesome that you can make an award-winning decoy and then pass it off to somebody just because you want to show them a great time, and talk about a selfless act, and again just being humble. That's amazing to me. And you touched there on some guys do compete, and not to put you on the spot or anything, but Brian here actually did just recently win the world championship for gunner pairs division in decoy carving. And I wanted to see, Brian, if maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, or maybe even some of your other accolades in decoy carving.
I must have gotten lucky. Yeah, that's all I can say. I really enjoy to carve. More so for the actual utilitarian purpose of taking it out and hunting, and to be able. I feel very humbled and honored to have won that. But, again, I really, I truly do it, for the decoys to get out and use. I mean, that's, for me, there's nothing, better than that, to have, ducks, tolling into your, the decoys that you carved. And, I know you mentioned Pat Gregory. Gregory, it's unbelievable the amount of, decoys he has. I'm not as a prolific carver as him. I don't put out as many blocks a year as Pat does. I wish I could, but I don't, But, we're slowly building a rig, and, I enjoy it. And the shows are fun. I'm not taking anything away from the shows. Again, I'm just humbled and honored, to be able to, to have, one at the Worlds, this year. But, there's so many great decoy carvers out there, and so many talented carvers. It's amazing, and it's kind of a smaller, tight-knit community, but it's amazing how those carvers are, again, most of them waterfowl hunters are, really try to welcome people into the fold and teach them, how to carve, and really welcoming, those new carvers as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I think you said there's a tight-knit community, and that's really cool. I got a real big kick when we were up there at Kibbe around one of those lunch tables. There was you and Pat, and then there's another gentleman there that was carving. I can't for the life of me remember his name, but you guys were kind of sharing.
That was Jeff Vine from Wisconsin.
That's right. Yep. But anyhow, you were sharing like techniques and different carves, and you guys were passing each other's decoys around to each other, and I was like, man, that's cool. Another great example of the camaraderie of duck hunting.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. That's why I enjoy carving so much. I really do.
Well, what would your advice be?
Well, how's your decoy coming along?
Well, funny story. I was pretty darn excited to get down there and get down to the farm and knock her out and get started. And like 2 days before I went down there, the bandsaw, I guess the blade on it snapped. And we have since not ordered another one. And I was real tempted to try and finagle a decoy body out of that cork anyhow. And I was like, no, I need to go ahead and do it right and wait to get another blade, because the last thing I want to do is start hacking away with a knife, come out with a frog or something.
All good.
Well, hey,
time. Patience is key with carving decoys.
Oh, I can only imagine.
You can take away, but you can't add, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, hey, Brian, if you were going to give someone some advice that really wanted to get into decoy carving, where would you direct them to?
There are a couple really good pages on Facebook. There's a Decoy Carving Forum. There's another one called Decoy Nuts. And there are a lot of good carvers and a lot of knowledgeable carvers on both of those Facebook pages. There are a couple, they can really direct you, to the right people. The one thing that I would suggest is, if someone's really interested in decoy carving, is try to find someone local that does carve. Sometimes it's really difficult to do things over the phone and, walk someone through it, where it's really easy, or it's easier, to show them, hands on. So a lot of times you can, try to connect with people on some of those pages, or, going online and just, looking for a show within your area, even if you have to drive a couple hours, and just get out there and just start meeting some people and, trying to hook up with somebody local. There's actually a lot more people, that are out there carving than we, probably even know. But, having that real hands-on help, assistance, it goes such a long way.
Yeah, I'm definitely a physical learner, and so that makes total sense, trying to find someone local that can actually show you how to do it, instead of trying to, maybe just 100% go off of a YouTube video or a phone conversation, as you were saying.
I've got the most important question here. So,
okay.
You only get to go on one more waterfowl hunt, or one more hunt in your life. Where are you going? When you going? Who you going with? And what are you guys targeting? And what's the weather like?
Well,
it's a hard one when you've had the variety that you've had.
Yeah, that is a tough one. Well, I'm definitely, if I can have, a few individuals with me, definitely my son would be right there with me, and my dad. Definitely have to have them along. I would probably be on the Mississippi River. We would be going after canvasbacks, and it'd be cold, clear. I see a northwest wind, and just a real biting cold day after canvasbacks, when the river's starting to ice up. Those are the special days for me. We don't get to experience that every season, but when we do, it's a really special day. Yeah. Yeah,
you just painted a picture for me that made me kind of sad that it's not even July yet.
It's 90 degrees out today.
I would take that nail-biting wind chill right now.
We can dream, though.
That's right. That's what you have the photo album for, just to reminisce and cry yourself to sleep.
I swear that's why we started the podcast, just so that
keep it going.
Yeah, like you were talking, like you said, everybody's got to have their off-season fix, as it were. Can't get the real stuff, got to get the, Nice. Well, Brian, what kind of gun do you shoot?
I actually I shoot a Benelli M2. I'm just shooting 3-inch. I haven't gone in the 3.5 yet. It's taken me a while even to go to a semi, so small baby steps for me.
Yeah.
Well, those 3.5 inches, they're expensive anyways.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We just recorded.
I don't need the kick either.
Yeah, that's right. That's maybe I'm sure did that kick maybe help you transition into the semi-auto?
Yeah, I actually my dad gave me that Benelli, and that's been a great gun. I love that gun.
Well, I got really one more question for you. I just kind of wanted to touch on, we've been talking about the rich history of decoy carving and all that stuff. And you touched a little bit about it earlier, but do you remember your first hunt, or do you remember when it clicked for you? Yep.
It was my. Oh, I remember it like yesterday. It was my first hunt. We were on the St. Lawrence River, opening day of duck season. Nice cool morning in a cattail marsh. There were two of my friends and I, and their dad, in that cattail marsh, and my first duck. It was a mallard hen. I remember I actually shot it with a borrowed Model 12, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. It's amazing the things that we forget over the years, but then how vivid one, moment in our lives can be. And for me, just seeing, the duck zipping around, laying in the decoys before shooting time, and, that first connection with the duck, and then, going back, cleaning the birds, and, having the birds for dinner. That lasts a lifetime.
I used to be so annoyed by, oh man, all the ducks are buzzing around before shooting light, and then, come shooting light, but I can honestly say this season I was not that was my favorite part of the day. Just enjoying the ducks, being there quiet. No one knows you're there. You have not yet disrupted nature. I love that, and you paint such a vivid picture. And that's how I know that it's so important to you, that day in your life. And if anybody is listening out there and has maybe they've had one or two or maybe even 3 waterfowl seasons underneath their belt, but perhaps you're listening to this and you've never even been out. You're dabbling in it. What do you have to say to that person, Brian?
Again, I think for that person that would really like to get out, even if it's just you may not at this point in time feel comfortable, with firearms, so getting out there. Hunter recruitment programs. There are a lot of workshops that these organizations, these states put on with the assistance of some of the conservation organizations. Just getting out there and meeting people, getting comfortable, with the shotgun, getting out and, shooting clays, and, getting more comfortable with the identification of, the ducks. And, most important, get involved, get out there, find a local chapter, meet some people, and, once you get out and, I think you really touched on it there a minute ago, just starting to experience some of the things. The actual take is great, and we all enjoy that, and enjoying a really nice, duck dinner with that. But, just some of the other things that you take in during the day, seeing the eagles late in the season, the swans flying through, just experience it all, taking in that sunrise with your friends with a cup of coffee, or your son or daughter. It's a closeness that it seems to be that we don't get to experience enough in today's day and age. Leave the phones in the boat, or leave them on silent. Really take it in and get to enjoy it, because life's too short. Gotta get out and enjoy it.
Brian, I think that's maybe the 4th or 5th time during this interview that you've painted like such a picture to me that like my heart is like, or my like stomach dropping, and I just like, I'm looking up and like picturing, what, these cattails,
That's the artist
in
you.
And it's I'm like homesick for duck season right now. So
it won't be long now. It won't be too much longer.
Yeah, one thing, I'm going to go back here a little bit, Brian. You said your first duck hunt, it was actually a buddy's dad that was with you and your friends?
Yes.
There you go, listeners, a perfect example. Talk about somebody who had some kids who grew up around hunting, or waterfowl hunting in particular, and they brought some friends out, and that's crazy. What a better story for some of you listeners to get out there and try to get some more youth involved. And look at you now, Brian. Your entire life is waterfowl, and you were invited by a friend and his dad. That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. Without that opportunity, and what's really funny about it, I mentioned earlier that my dad was primarily a deer hunter and fisherman, and now later in life, I take him duck hunting all the time when he comes into town. He and one of his really close friends, they usually come into town for 4 or 5 days, and we duck hunt during that time. So it's kind of come full circle where I take him out, and I've kind of gotten him involved in waterfowl hunting. So it's funny. Life takes you on funny journeys. You just have to enjoy it.
I have the same story. My dad, he was big into upland hunting. We had German Shorthair Pointer, and that's primarily what I cut my teeth on in the hunting world. And then a little bit of deer hunting he did here and there. And then he's super into turkey hunting, and I am getting him into waterfowl. And he went on his first pit blind field goose hunt with my buddy Clint. Clint's a listener. When my dad had 50 geese in his face, I don't even know if he pulled the trigger. I don't know. But it's like seeing my dad be 12 years old again. Like, it is great.
Oh, it is. Yeah, that's priceless. Yeah, that's priceless.
Well, hey, Brian, we really appreciate you coming on the show, and I think the listeners are going to enjoy this one. I think it's been a pretty good episode. And for you listeners out there, go support Delta. Maybe even go check out some decoy carving. Look into getting into a new hobby, and, we already spend enough money on this sport. Might as well dabble in a little more. Maybe it'll even save you some money in the long run. But, I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is definitely get involved with those local chapters, and go meet some friends and make some wood duck boxes. And Brian, you got so many more last minute words of wisdom?
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on, and like I said earlier, it really is the good old days right now. So now's the prime time if you've been thinking about getting involved to get out there, join a local Delta chapter. Get out in the field, take a kid hunting, and enjoy it, right now, because we really are fortunate to, be in a fantastic era for waterfowl hunting. So, get outdoors and get involved.
All right, Brian. Hey, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
Brian.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Fowl Front Waterfowl Podcast. Please come join us on our Facebook group, the Fowl Front Waterfowl Podcast group, where you can connect with a good group of hunters, because we're all in this together. We need to act like it so that hopefully our great grandkids will be hunting ducks over our favorite public lands. We also ask that you go ahead and give us a written review on iTunes and give us 5 stars if you think we deserve it. And we really do want to hear back from you so that we can give you the best possible content. And if you get in on that Facebook group, you can get in there and you can ask questions, and you can tell us what you want to hear next, or you can tell us what you don't like, and we'll be sure to tailor things to our listeners. So, all right, stay safe out there, and we will see you next week.